Yeah, so I'm going to talk to you about disrupting the process, and what we're going to cover today is a number of things, but we're going to do it very quickly. We're going to talk about how you need to break the artwork process to make it better. We're going to talk about why your current process leaves you exposed to potential issues. We're going to cover a little bit of how to disrupt the process and align to a new innovative way of working. And then lastly, we're going to cover how do you get there. So just to start off, when most of us think about the word disruption, I think we often view it in a kind of a negative connotation. But I'm going to talk about it in a more positive way today. So what we're looking at here, Steven Sinofsky created this diagram on the 4 stages of disruption, and he said that innovation and disruption are the hallmarks of the technology industry. Now, he's an ex-Microsoft VP, so his focus is probably obviously going to be on technology. Another person who's written a lot about this notion of disruptive innovation is a man by the name of Clayton Christensen. And his view is that disruption is a necessary part of innovation and growth. And he didn't just apply the theory to technology, he also included processes and services in that statement. So if we look at the diagram in that context, the first stage would be the disruption stage, and we're introducing a product or a service or a new way of working into an organization. And then the evolution, stage 2, is to rapidly innovate along this new way of working. Stage 3 then would be the convergence stage, which is really looking at the value proposition of what you've just introduced into the organization and looking at that value proposition compared to your legacy way of working. And then the 4th stage, called reimagination in this diagram, is really just putting into place what was originally this disruption into your organization. So we're going to talk about this in the next 10 minutes here about this disruption in terms of a new way of working to manage your content for your labels. So let's first touch on why your current process leaves you exposed. And so if you think about the content that's required on a label, where are the potential leaks in the current state? So that's what we're talking about here. And the first one, and maybe the most obvious one, is all of these manual touch points. And Jonathan touched on this as well when he was speaking. There's a lot of people who are involved in this process, and there's a lot of manual touch points along the way. So if you think about when you create your labels right from concept to getting them out to market, if you think about all of the people who either provide copy or content, approve that content or that label or the copy document, and then all of the people that touch it along the way, there's a pretty high number of people involved in that process. And then lastly, again, as Jonathan stated, it's a complex process. You know, very few companies work with one brand or one product in one country. So when you start thinking about your entire portfolio and all of the languages and markets and countries that you work in, it very quickly becomes a complex process to manage all of that content. So here's an example. And in the middle here, we have a number of different copy statements. And these copy statements, depending on what sector you're in and what products you have, these statements might be different for you. But the main point here is that they typically are collected through Word documents and Excel documents and maybe email messages. And you have all of these different people involved in the process. And then through this collation of all this information, you have what I'll refer to as these heroic coordinators who are basically collecting all of this information. And then out the end of this comes all of these copy documents. And typically what we see is that it's a one-to-one relationship. For every item or product or SKU that you have, there's probably going to be one copy document that goes with it. So again, it takes a lot of effort to make sure that you've got all of the right copy and that it's all approved and all of the right people have seen it on those copy documents. And then the stakeholders. So if you think about all of the people that need to touch or approve the copy document or the artwork, R&D might be involved in new product commercialization, the initiation process or redesigns. In pharmaceutical companies, it's often the regulatory group who is initiating product label changes. And then we have all of these other parties. You've got your designers, maybe some external agencies you work with, quality groups, pack engineering, and so on. So again, lots of different touch points, both for the copy document and ultimately the label. And so if we look at this another way, starting with the copy document, we typically go through 3 approval cycles when we're managing artwork. So the first would be artwork creation. And at artwork creation stage, in most organizations, how that copy gets onto the artwork is through a cut and a paste. So that's a manual touch point. And so once the copy is on the artwork, we go through the art creation cycle, and then we go into pre-press and so on. And at any stage in the process, a change could be necessary, hopefully not in pre-press and print stage, but before the label is released, you might go through a couple of cycles in the artwork creation stage where changes are necessary. And often what we see is that those changes don't necessarily always make it back into the copy document, into that starting source. They often are done directly on the artwork, especially if it's a last-minute change or if it's an emergency and you're running to a tight timeline. So then what that causes is that you end up with your system of record being the pack. So a year from now, if you need to make a change to this label, your starting point may in fact be the label that's already out in the marketplace. You may not go back to that copy document as your starting point. So now you're having to very obviously tightly control your version control on the labels and make sure that your starting point is always that most up-to-date label. Now, this new way of working would introduce this notion of a database that's managing that copy for you. So your database becomes your system of record, and you're no longer relying on making sure that you're tracking those labels and using those as your starting point. And there's many benefits to that. So in this model, if we think about aligning to this new way of working, under the current state, then we see our copy statements that come in through these different methods, and then they end up on these copy documents that get pushed into the artwork. And then on the right-hand side of this page, we see the future state, which is all of your copy statements neatly lined up in a database and all of your stakeholders interacting with the database. Now, theoretically, this might look easy, but the reality is this kind of change is extremely disruptive to a business. There's a lot of stakeholders involved. They're very probably comfortable with the current way of working. And most importantly, when you introduce a change into this process, any kind of change is going to introduce risk. So there's a number of reasons why this is a very disruptive thing to put into your business. And it requires heavy change management to make sure that everybody's moving to this model when an organization does change. And we're not necessarily talking about the copy document going away, because a lot of companies rely on their copy documents. We're just talking about maybe thinking about it a little bit differently, and that the copy document could just be a byproduct of the information that's kept in the database, but people are actually interacting with the database through some kind of nice UI that they can manage this copy in. So then if we take this a step further, what we would be talking about here is having the copy database feed the artwork. And so where we talked about this being a manual cut and paste in the more traditional method, what we would have happen here is that the copy would automatically be applied into the artwork once it's approved in the database or in the system. So you'd remove that manual touch point, and then we're maybe never going to get to the place where no changes would happen beyond the artwork creation stage. But if we did, then ideally what you would say happening here is that the copy would be updated in the database and then automatically feed back into the artwork. So we're talking about a couple of things needing to be in place here. Not only would the copy need to be in the database, but the artwork would have to have the logic in it to be able to understand where the copy needs to go and how it flows together with everything else on the artwork itself. And then ultimately with this model, we could even move into a world where if a change is made on the artwork, it automatically updates the database from the artwork. And with that kind of a model, especially with a pharmaceutical practice, you would need to make sure that you've got very tight controls over when those updates happen in the artwork and how they feed back and who can do that and who needs to approve it and so on. But technically, you know, this is really where we see the model potentially heading, is where we have this notion of round tripping of data so that you can keep track of everything, and you've always got that synchronization between the copy database and the actual artwork that it sits on. So another key piece of this equation is, I'll call it this power of one to many. And if you see in the middle of the page here, we have this ingredient panel. And this ingredient panel, or it could be a claim statement or a product description or storage instructions, whatever the case is, but this statement could be used in multiple regions. You could have it translated in multiple languages across different sizes of your products and across different lines. But it could be the same statement being used on all of these artwork. So now one of the big values of the database model is that you can quickly do an impact analysis. So you can identify just by looking in one place in a system that this ingredient statement is used on 25 artwork. So now you can very quickly say, okay, what's the impact of me making a change to this statement? Should I do it now, or should I wait for another regulatory change that's coming? So it gives you more information to make those decisions that you need to make to manage your portfolio of products. So why do this? What's the payback of introducing this kind of disruption into your business? The first is the manual touch points. You know, I don't think that we're anywhere close to getting to eliminating the quality checks and balances that we have in place, and those tools will still be needed. What we're trying to do here, though, is to reduce potential issues from being introduced into your process. So the more manual touch points you eliminate, the higher quality you just build into your process. And then managing that single source of truth, having that place where you know that the latest approved copy that's your system of record. There's a lot of value in having that trust and that truth in one place. And then just by default, if you do introduce the first two bullets, then you will get speed. You'll get better speed to market because you'll have fewer cycles, fewer reviews, and things that need to be done on the artwork. And then lastly, the copy consistency. If you get to a model where you have that one ingredient statement or that claim statement in one place in a database instead of on 20 Word documents, then you have a much better way of managing your copy, and you can quickly do that impact analysis. And just getting over back to the image here, back to the water theme, this image is these heroic coordinators who can now take a break because they're on holiday, because they're all caught up on managing their copy. So if you do think that this would be worth exploring for your business, here's some very high-level 3 steps. How do you dip your toe in the water in this? How would you move forward with this kind of concept? And the first is the business case. So this is really taking a look at what would drive this for your business. Where are the benefits of why it would make sense for you to embark on this kind of disruption into your organization? Is it regulatory driven, which may be the case, and with pharmaceutical, that would be a primary reason to introduce this. Is it consistency across your labels? Is it a need to have a lower cycle time in your artwork? So there's a number of different things that can drive this. And one of the things that we often see with the business case is that regulatory ends to be a primary participant in this process, and often even a sponsor in this process, because a lot of the copy is owned or controlled by the regulatory team. So they're really key to implementing or deploying something like this. The second is business practices, and there's a number of tools and technologies and techniques in the marketplace that will help with this kind of a model. We use a process called an every square inch review, and that's simply going through your labels and identifying each of the different types of copy on the labels across your portfolio of labels. Where are the different copy statements used, and where are they different, and where should they be the same? Who owns each of those copy elements? Who needs to approve it? Where do they come from? So it's really an analysis on your products and on your copy, and trying to determine where is a good place for us to start, where would you get value from this type of a model, and so on. So there's a number of things in the marketplace that can help with some best practices. And then the third is the operational change. And so if you do decide to go down this road once you've done the business case and you've looked at your different options of what's available in the market, the operational change is a big one here because of the disruptive nature of what we're talking about. And so having the leadership and the sponsorship and the ownership of driving this into the business, and also the roadmap of how you do this. There's a number of different ways to approach this type of initiative. We would probably typically recommend that you start with some small wins and then build on those disruptive successes, so that you have some learnings along the way and you can introduce it in a more stable way as you move forward. And that's it for me. So if you are interested in this topic or want to learn more about it, visit us at our website, and we'd love to talk to you more about this. This is we're very passionate about this subject at Blue, and we think it's really a way forward for the industry.